to the Family Movie Night podcast, where we want to help your family have better conversations around the content you consume. This is episode 45, and we are here discussing the really fun action adventure movie Free Guy from 2021, which is about a bank teller who discovers that he is actually a NPC, a non-playable character, one of the background characters in all your video games. And he lives inside a brutal open world video game a la Grand Theft Auto. So this is a movie that stars Ryan Reynolds and is just a ton of fun. And we're going to be talking about it in a little bit. But first, I want to introduce my wonderful co-host, the hero of the podcast, Donnie Dorsey, who earlier we were talking could easily be Ryan Reynolds' guy, but we think, Donnie, you are much more our Lil Ray Howery as Buddy, just the not only the comedic relief of this podcast, but let's just say you're the heart of this podcast, man. Just like Buddy is the heart of this film. So, Donnie, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling good. I feel like I'm bringing the heartbeat back. It's like couple beats per minute. We're here to flow the blood.
That's right, man. You got to keep it pumping. You got to keep us going because of course the heart murmur of the podcast, the villain of this podcast. That's gonna be our new one, the heart murmur,
the carotid artery
of this podcast.
Sawyer, I love you.
Sawyer Hewlett, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I like this movie. I don't have any villainous things to say about this movie.
You at least get to have kind of a comedic villain, Taika Waititi, who at least gets a few good jokes in this movie as our villain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love Taika Waititi. I also love Dude. Dude is also a villain in this movie.
Spoiler alert. But I will say this, Dude quickly turns from villain to one of the best heroes of the podcast. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But then, of course, we have the mom of our podcast, Heidi Cooper. You are literally pulling real world mom and aunt duties today.
Five this weekend.
5 kids in the house. Yes. How are you doing? Are you surviving? Are you
surviving?
Alive?
Yeah, I'm alive. I'm surviving. Coffee is grand.
Yes, but I know you are excited to talk about this movie.
Yes, it was super fun. I loved it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first up, Donnie Dorsey, why don't you tell everybody what we do on this podcast?
Yeah, so on this podcast, what we do is we encourage every family at Community Christian Church to have a monthly movie night to help you and your children build memories, start conversations that matter. The goal of our family ministry is to help you raise your children to love Jesus and his way of life above all other things. And we know that critical to that is for you to have a routine, regular time of connection and shared experiences that'll help you build stronger relationships.
And, movie nights are great opportunities to do that because movies are not just an easy way to share laughter and joy, fear and sadness in a safe environment, but they also give us a chance to talk about what matters most to us in ways that are meaningful, memorable with our children. And on this podcast, we want to not only recommend some movies you could watch on your monthly movie night, but give you some ideas of meaningful conversations you can have with your children during or after the movie.
And as always, the point of this podcast is not to add one more thing to your list of things to feel guilty about if you don't get done as parents. We just want to make it easier for you and your kids to enjoy being together so that you can build memories and have conversations that matter. So throughout our conversation today, just remember that we want to have fun and help you think through simple and easy ways to share your love of Jesus with your kids.
Well, and today we have a really fun movie to talk about that will be a part of this whole idea of really sharing your love of Jesus with your kids. We do want to just let you know up front, we try to do this whenever we know we're copying or covering a movie that has some content that might be a little too mature for your younger kids. This movie is a definite PG-13, not necessarily for it's too much gratuitous of anything. There's really no sex in the movie. There's no I would say heavy violence. Almost all the violence is cartoonish, right? I mean, I think so. Very much.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, it's more the humor. There are certainly some things that are joked about that are more of a adult content, sexual content at times level that probably will be over the heads of some of your younger kids, but definitely that preteen, early teenage that may leave you with some uncomfortable moments. No judgment. All of my children watch this, so I will not judge you if you watch it with your kids, but we want to let you know because we don't want you in an awkward situation where your kid may look at you and go, what did that joke mean? And then you have to have a conversation you weren't prepared for. We want to help prepare you. So we would suggest this is definitely 13 and up. I think, is that what our suggestion is on this one? Yep. Okay. So let's talk, though, about Free Guy. With all of that in place, what is it that we enjoyed about Free Guy? Let's go ahead and start right here with our triple bypass surgery. Sawyer Hewlett, what is it that you enjoy about this movie?
I enjoyed a lot about this movie. And like, so here's the thing. Ryan Reynolds is kind of an acquired taste of humor. That is a taste that I have acquired. I really like Ryan Reynolds' humor.
I don't know if he's an acquired taste. Sawyer's trying to protect me. I don't like Ryan Reynolds. I think most people like Ryan Reynolds. So yeah. I appreciate Sawyer trying to protect me from all the heat that I will get. I do not enjoy Ryan Reynolds.
Give him the heat. He deserves the heat, Sawyer. Don't take his back.
Yeah.
Don't take his back. Just let him have the heat.
Heidi, is that what you enjoy about Ryan Reynolds? Is his humor?
Exactly.
I just watched the Ryan Reynolds movies for the articles.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, I really like this movie. I was about to say the Ryan Reynolds aspect. I love him in this movie. I love him in a lot of movies, but this movie is an extremely Ryan Reynolds time is the thing. And I really like it. Really like the humor, the action. Like Nathan said it earlier, it's really cartoony, but it's also like it's in a live action world that takes place in a video game. And the movie does a good job at making all of that feel cool. Because I think about a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Ready Player One, a movie that at the time I kind of liked, but now like I look back on it and I read the book and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than the movie. But also, this movie does video game action in a movie way better than that movie. And I really enjoyed that. This movie has an exceptionally good supporting cast. And a lot of these like tentpole big budget movies, like we just need the big actor and they're going to carry the movie. And Ryan Reynolds does carry the movie, but there are other characters thrown in. Joe Keery is in this movie and I really like him. Jodie Comer is good. I don't necessarily love her character, but she does a lot really well. Taika Waititi is really great. And Ryan Reynolds makes an appearance as a second character named Dude near the end of the movie. That is just fantastic.
All right. So I thought Dude was Ryan Reynolds in a bodysuit.
I think it's CGI, isn't it?
It's not. It's CGI in that they replaced the face. That's a real person's body. His name is Aaron Reed.
Yeah.
And they just replaced the face.
Yeah. He's
and
like a bodybuilder.
This may not be helpful for Aaron Reed. Your body looks fake. I was convinced it was like some kind of suit that they had him wearing. But that's a wonderful moment in the movie. But Heidi Cooper
and even just to piggyback on what you were talking about, Sawyer, even the part where he gets his nose broken, where he takes the glasses.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, oh, how long are they going to have him walking around like that? Like after he walks out, I'm like, no, let's fix this face. Like it just looked so real. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. It was amazing the way that they brought video game violence to life. It was actually quite cool.
So Heidi, what is it that you enjoy about this? The Ryan Reynolds stan herself.
Yeah, man. There's so much. I really do think that his character is so funny. Like when he's just so chipper, but then he like wakes up and his keeps waking up when he's regenerating every time he dies and stuff. That was hilarious. And just, I think everything. I mean, really, there's so much that I liked about the movie. I loved Buddy's character. I loved Channing Tatum's character. He was probably my favorite. Yeah, even the mom of the video camera. Like,
the mom of
hilarious.
the Twitch streamer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I said this off camera, but when she said, "You're 22 and you live in my house, there is no God."
Yes,
Like,
yes, that was
hilarious. Moms felt like that before.
Absolutely. That was hilarious. So yeah, very funny, very fun, very fun. Donnie Dorsey, though, what do you got to bring to the table here? What is it you love about Free Guy?
Well, I mean, as the heartbeat, I think my favorite part was by far the simplicity the movie dealt with handling very complex emotions and situations. Like, they dealt with a lot of deeper, like, emotions and stuff, while also being able to balance that in a comedic way.
Yeah.
And, like, because you're dealing with someone who's realizing that there's more to the world than what they've seen, and now they're embracing that. But they do it in such a comical way, but also a way that has so much heart that you can't help but kind of want to follow along on Guy's journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I actually think the heartbeat is what really works for me here. I do think it's funny, and I do think the action is pretty decent. I think it's fine. I don't think it's anything necessarily on any particular part of this movie. And this is what shocks me. I really like this movie. I can't tell you what it is that I like that much because there's a lot that frustrates me about this movie. But I've watched it now twice, and every time I walk away going, that was good. I had a good time with that. That was a fun kind of movie. And I do think if I was kind of pinned down asking, I think it is the heartbeat of the movie. I think it's a very sweet movie, and a movie that could be more sarcastic than it is. I think it's one of the most earnest Ryan Reynolds performances. I think it has the least amount of kind of his veneer of kind of and I think what doesn't work often for me about his comedy is he's always a little bit above things, poking down at it, which when you're that handsome, that's a problem because you're above everyone. So it feels like you're punching down all the time.
It has such a relatable air to it because like everyone has felt at times that they're just going through the motions.
Yes.
And like he made you go, hey, you're not alone in this. And it's like, hey, I'm like Ryan Reynolds. This is great.
Well, and he's very sincere. All of his emotions are kind of on his sleeve. His desire is on his sleeve. All of that, I think, just works so well in this movie. Anyway, that's kind of where I want to leave it. I think there's some really good moments.
And to that point, Nathan, like, I think, like, I don't know, a movie that quite honestly I kind of like, but I don't like the franchise it's in at all. Hobbs and Shaw. He's the villain in that movie, and it's like a very prototypical Ryan Reynolds performance in that it's humorous and he's really cynical the entire time.
Yeah.
And this movie, I feel like, is a departure from the norm of Ryan Reynolds, in that and you said it perfectly, Nathan, he's so sincere. And that's so against type for Ryan Reynolds is the thing. So that worked great for me.
Yeah. Not unless you watch some of his older stuff, like his rom-coms, where like there's some really heartfelt ones that he has in his catalog.
Oh, dude, The Proposal is so good.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of really good moments in this movie, and I think it works by and large. And we really, though, think this movie, what works so well about it is the themes that give you an opportunity to really have good conversations with your teenagers at this point, because this is really who we're pushing this with. And I think it really fits more on the teenage spectrum of things, which is this is a movie that's a lot about what do you do with freedom? What do you do when you have freedom? So Ryan Reynolds, the name of the movie is Free Guy, right? Which actually has like multiple meanings, because you've got at one point in this movie, they're actually trying to free Guy. They're trying to get him to freedom. But at the very beginning of the movie, he is set free, and he's woken up to realize every character in every NPC, which are the non-playable characters, they're the characters that you as the avatar, as the video game player, interact with in the video game world. right?
Yeah.
And they all have scripts that they live on. And you've seen this if you played any video game where every time you go to a character, they say the same thing and they do the same action. And they have one goal, which is to somehow help this player. And he ends up getting woken up. He ends up getting, in this world, it's the glasses that the playable characters wear. He's able to get it and kind of see the heads up display, like what you would see in a video game that kind of gives you the controls of the world around you.
Yeah.
And he's able to kind of wake up and see, I don't have to live by the script I've always lived, and I can be in control. But what happens is all the playable characters, so all the real world people who play in the video game, they have all this freedom because they realize they're in a video game. But the way they use their freedom, and even Guy at the beginning of the movie really uses his freedom, is for selfish purposes. It's to get more money, to get more points, to win this stuff. And the way the playable characters use it is they're killing the non-playable characters. They're stealing their stuff. They're brutalizing people. They're sexualizing people. They are really using their freedom to indulge in what the Bible would call indulging in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And Guy eventually has this great moment, and this is really where I want to start our conversation, actually towards the end of the movie, where he has a conversation when Guy finally realizes, oh, I'm living in a video game. Because for the first, 45 minutes, hour of the movie, he doesn't even know it's a video game. He just thinks, I've seen these secret parts of the world. He doesn't realize there's a world outside the video game. And then it becomes real to him, this isn't real. And so he says to his friend, Buddy, maybe this isn't real. And Donnie, you read it earlier. Do you have that quote up of what Buddy says back to him in that moment?
I'm trying to remember. What's more real than a person trying to help someone they love? Now, if that's not real, I don't know what is.
Right. Buddy's response is basically this idea of what is real is the relationships we have. It is the way that we love people, the way that we serve people. Now, obviously, our life is not a video game and we're not living in a simulation. So reality is God. So that's where we have to really shift. The reality is God, and God is love. And so reality really is this love of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit that we get to take part in. And so that's really kind of a heady concept. I want to get to this idea of how do we use this movie to have a conversation with our teenagers about freedom, and really what freedom is for is not to indulge in sinful things that hurt other people, things that use other people to get what we want, but really to have that moment of, I want to help people. So Donnie, you want to start us off? I think you're the master at this. So let's get going.
Well, I mean, I think it does a really good job of when it talks about freedom. And the idea is that we kind of view freedom in this way of, I get to do all the things. And it may be for a kid that's going to college, they're I get to be out on my own and, go to all these parties and do all the things my parents told me not to do. But a lot of time, freedom is much more than that. Freedom is the choice to sometimes choose others over yourself. It's the idea of moving forward when things are difficult, or finding joy in difficult times, or freedom is much more than what the world tells you freedom is. It's hey, freedom is you get to do anything you want, but you also have the freedom to do things that impact others as well as the world around you in a much bigger way.
Well, it's the thing I know that when Donnie and I used to lead a group of juniors and seniors, and we would talk about the kind of the Christian sexual ethic, right? That the idea is that sex really is just for a man and a woman who are married to one another. They're committed in this relationship. We would talk about this idea that what the sexual ethic of our age is basically this idea that if two consenting adults who want to do anything, or honestly, the sexual ethic of our day, if you have children, you may want to cover their ears, is more than two adults. Any amount of people who consent and say, we're okay with this, that as long as it is done and everyone's okay with it, then it's fine. And the truth is, if you are to say to anybody, if they are to say to themselves, hey, I want to do this thing, there's this desire in me to do this thing, and I tell myself no, I'm repressing myself. I am keeping myself from freedom. I am repressing myself. And if you tell me I shouldn't do something, you are oppressing me.
Yeah.
I have a desire that you're telling me I shouldn't live out. And that's the kind of sexual way. That's the way our world lives with anything. If I want to spend my money and you tell me you think that's a bad idea, how dare you oppress me? Or if I don't do it, I feel like I'm not living life to the full. And there's a way in this movie. That's what we think the point of a video game is to indulge all of those things. I don't want to get into the morals of whether you should play Grand Theft Auto. Full disclosure, my wife plays Grand Theft Auto a lot. So I'm not judging anyone who does. But my point is to say, to indulge in these kind of things, right? That's the idea. You go and you indulge, you do whatever you want. And there's this feeling of that's what real life is. Well, in this movie, there's this moment where it's not just the non-playable characters who are playing by a script. What Guy reveals is these people who have freedom, the playable characters, they're also living by a script. Because there's a moment, and I want Heidi to talk to this because I know she loved this moment, where surprise cameo Channing Tatum shows up, and he says to Guy, "Oh, I've never thought about not killing these people." Like the people who live by the do whatever you want, that is also a script. That isn't freedom, because eventually the thing that you did in freedom takes captive of you. And Paul says that in the book of Romans. You indulge in your sin and then you become a slave to it. You're no longer free. So Heidi, can you talk about how this movie introduces that idea of kind of being held captive to this? And maybe there's a better way to live. Once again, it's about video games, so don't leave it on there. But talk about how we can talk to our kids about, hey, you may do these things thinking you're the one who wants to do them, but really you're now in this kind of addictive, really, lifestyle. Can you talk to that, Heidi?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think the thing that, well, first of all, it's never a bad idea to put Channing Tatum and Ryan Reynolds. Let me just throw that out there in one. Yeah, it's never a bad idea. So
that's Heidi living according to her flesh. I just want to throw that out there. This is Heidi living according to her
choice
flesh.
I'm making, and I'm well aware of what I'm sacrificing on the back end. But no, I think that's kind of the thing we were talking about earlier is that, like, you know, I have like a interesting perspective of having one adult child and two younger children. And so I've got two that are constantly wishing for that someday when they have all these freedoms. And what I remember my husband, he's my oldest stepson. And when he came into the picture, one thing he used to always say is that nothing is actually free, that everything in life is a trade-off. And so like what you were talking about, Nathan, you know, with like when we think that we have these freedoms, when we think that we are being oppressed or we're repressing our feelings or things like that, a lot of times it's because that's what wisdom looks like. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing we can kind of take away from this type of scenario. Like tell our kids like, hey, yeah, you know, like you might not have thought about like being the good guy in a bad video game. Like this is all just like fun to watch. And it's really, you know, it's really interesting and it keeps you like kind of engaged the whole time. But the bigger picture is that wisdom thing. Like what am I losing on the back end by choosing this on the front end, you know? So I think that's kind of the thing that goes back to what you were talking about in Romans and how, you know, it you know, when we choose to live the way we want to, then we are choosing to not live the way God wants us to. And that's definitely not, as Christians, what's best for us, nor is it what we truly should want.
Right. Well, yeah. I know I've used the phrase before that if you, and this isn't original to me, and I don't know who it is, so it's hard to say. It sounds like an Andy Stanley type thing, but it might be John Ortberg, one of those guys. But the idea is if you misuse your freedom now, you limit your freedom later. And like the obvious example of that is if I misuse my freedom now to break the law when I'm in prison, that limits my freedom, right? And obviously that's an extreme example, but it's the same thing. If I misuse my freedom now to buy whatever I want and I go into debt, I am limited later in my freedom to buy what I want. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson to teach our kids. Donnie, you look like you got something to say.
So it's interesting. I had a conversation with my oldest this week that kind of references that whole point is that I said, you know, something to the effect of like, well, you're choosing to do this thing. And their response was, I didn't choose to do that. I said, and I paused. I said, okay, when you pick something else over what you should be doing, whether you're consciously choosing it, it is a choice to not do what is best for you.
Right.
And so they were looking at me like, oh, because it's always this mindset of going, oh, well, it's just, oh, well, I didn't choose to do that. Well, all the decisions you did that led up to that moment, those were choices because you chose to do another, you had another option, kind of like going with Heidi was talking about. It's like, it's that going, you say, okay, well, this is what we could do, but this is what we're choosing to do. This is
Right.
what we have the option. This is what available, but we're going to go with not wisdom, but we're going to go with what our feelings are or what we feel like we're being repressed of.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think, Donnie, that's a good example of how we do this younger. I mean, I think we talk about this a lot, but how important consequences and boundaries and, rules, if you want to call them, are for young kids, because what it does teach them is every action has a consequence.
Mhm.
Every yes comes with a no. Like every choice and so to reuse the statement I said earlier, if I misuse my freedom now, and this is what you were saying to your daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
You misused your freedom to choose, and now you have limited choices over here. But the other is true too. If I choose to repress myself, if I choose to limit my freedom now, it's reciprocal, and in larger ways, I somehow get way more freedom on this end.
Mm-hmm.
And every adult knows that. Every adult knows right now I am living under the weight and consequences of decisions I made when I was 13, 18, 25, 30. I'm wearing those, and it has limited my abilities, right? We talked about sexual ethics, but financial is the same deal. If I have no savings, if I have no ability to control my retirement, if I have all this debt in my life right now because of freedom I indulged in when I was 18, I am now limited in what I can do. And the only way to teach that to our kids is to help them understand this is not mommy and daddy just making rules. This is a law of the universe. You reap what you sow. There is no way to get around it. And right now you live under mommy and daddy's roof. And so we may even have, and I've said that to my wife, sometimes our decisions are just arbitrary. I don't have this is just my house. Like, so one rule in our house is when you're downstairs, if you're going to be loud, you have to go to your room or go outside. There is no option. And so we have a room in our in our dining room. They can go in there and color and play with Play-Doh and all the different, Legos and those different kind of things. But if it gets too loud, you have to go upstairs. That's just the consequence of being too loud. And they're like, well, I don't think that's fair. You don't get to decide. And I go, I do get to decide. I do. I pay the bills on this house. Like I do. And I don't have to have some moral reason. I'm the one who makes. And so if you misuse your freedom downstairs, it limits your freedom of where you get to go in my house. Now you've got to be upstairs in your room. And you still get to play. And it's not some mean daddy. But I know a lot of us as parents, we go, God, that just feels so mean and so harsh and so whatever it is. But I'm teaching my kids, use your freedom wisely. So that's for young kids. Obviously, the older, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to go back to what you said, because I think it's really important that parents point this part out. This isn't just like a God thing of sowing and reaping.
Right.
He points it out to us. He makes it known to us, but that's just him doing us a favor. This is like a universal thing, just like gravity. We live in a world where consequences happen for whatever we put out. So, and I want to take it a step further for the parents who might have some kids who are like some of us, or like some of, the people in our lives where you get paralyzed by making decisions. And all of this just seems so overwhelming. But I'll take it a step further and say inaction or not choosing is a choice. And so if we can talk to our kids about that, just understand how your kids operate, because, there's going to be a lot of kids who they almost get paralyzed in making choices as they come up to adulthood, because it is overwhelming, because they see the consequences, because they get all this stuff we're talking about, and it feels really overwhelming. But for them, there's freedom in this, because you tell them, hey, this is life, and you're going to keep on moving forward. You're going to have to be responsible for yourself. but you're going into it with some wisdom ahead of time, and some apprehension, so
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. But so I think it's just really important what you were saying. I wanted to make sure that we kind of circle back to that and like make that like kind of the foundation for the conversation. It's like, this just is a thing. You can't get
Yes.
around it. It's whether you choose to serve God or not, you will have consequences for whatever actions you have, and we see that all around us in the world. And so I definitely wanted to circle back and highlight that.
Well, and even in small ways, there are ways we can do that and I know this sounds so just opposite of our world. And maybe that's good because maybe it's more kingdom. I don't know. But intentionally limiting my kids' choices the younger they are and going, these are the things you can choose from. You don't get to choose from everything. And so even like my wife and I intentionally set, not for financial reasons, we set a limit on these are the amount of kids you can invite to your birthday party. These are the ones. And you've got to make choices on who do I want to invite. Because, and any parent knows this, if I say, you can invite everyone you know, they're going to invite everyone they know. And I know there's this feeling of, well, that's what they should get to do. But, and this is really important in my household, is you need to understand every choice, every freedom comes with a responsibility. Because here's the problem. People, I won't just take children, teenagers who get to make choices without any responsibility of those choices, without bearing the responsibility of those choices, become what apparently our whole older generations think everyone younger is. It's entitlement. It's I should get whatever I want, because making the choice is the hard part. Making the choice is not the hard part. The hard part is bearing the responsibility of your choices. And the more that we can do that. So I'll take a tiny example. When we go to the restaurant, my kids order their food. And if they can't order their food, they don't eat their food. And I have one kid, I don't get them food. The choices, here are the choices, and you don't get to order anything on the menu. You can order from the kids menu. And here are the choices. Pick your choice. And I had one daughter who I thought she ain't going to order this food. She's going to sit there and every other parent's going to be like, oh my God, he's not feeding his children. But the idea is this is the choice. And then we do this. And then you can go up to the drink machine and I'll go with you and you can pick out one drink. We're not doing refills. You can do one drink. And occasionally I'll have, Daddy, I don't like this drink. Okay, choose wisely next time. This is your drink. We're not changing it out because you don't like it. And I know, and I'm not saying you have to follow this. I'm giving you an example of this, an idea of what maybe limiting choices looks like, is to say everything bears one. And I know there's a way in which this feels like this is not a spiritual issue, but I believe everything is a spiritual issue. And my training my body to understand every action has a consequence is me learning to love Jesus. Because as Heidi already said, when Jesus comes and says, judge not, or you too will be judged, this isn't saying God is going to judge you, so watch out. What he's saying is this is a law of the universe. Do you want to live in a universe where everyone is judged according to what they do or don't do? No, you don't want to, because you don't want anyone to judge you. But if you become a judgmental, critical, hard-hearted person, that is how everyone else will judge you, because people are not kind to judgmental, hard-hearted persons, right? And the same is true for reaping and sowing. And Jesus is trying to say, hey, because this is the way the world operates, and I'm the one who designed the world, I'm going to tell you, well, that makes me love Jesus, because now Jesus is telling me the secrets of how to live. But if I teach my kids, you can get whatever you want and do whatever you want, then they will grow up thinking, why isn't Jesus doing that? Jesus doesn't love me. He's restricting my freedom. He's telling me what I have to do. And that's a whole different.
I'm like doing so many head shakes and yep over here with my mute. But I think everything you're saying is so spot on. And another thing I would say is, like, for us parents, like, just a call to the parents, me most of all, like, I'm the biggest sinner of all in this. Not sparing them the consequences when they come, and especially as our kids get a little bit older and they're making choices outside of the realm of like what we are, involved in, even just like middle school kids, late elementary kids, where they're at school and they get to choose their groups of friends and things like that. That those types of choices that come with consequences, when we want to jump in and we want to fix it, we want to give them all the answers and, solve all their problems, then that creates a 16-year-old who's going out and drinking and driving. I'm not saying, that this automatically is going to happen, but I'm saying that these are the kind of scenarios that you come up against in no time at all. When you look at your little kids and you think, oh my gosh, I just want to protect them. And like I said, I'm like, I struggle so much with this. And so I'm not saying like it's not something hard, but I know for me, it's been really insightful, like allowing my kids to experience some pain sometimes from their choices, because they shift their thinking, and that's something that's so worth it, no matter, even if they have to like suffer a little bit.
Well, I think it's been a really good conversation so far. I want to kind of shift just for our last little bit. What we've really focused on now is trying to help our kids realize that freedom is not freedom to indulge in everything I want, but it's not freedom to do whatever I want. It's freedom to live like Christ. And there's this moment in the movie, and that both times really spoke to me. It's the moment when he's got everyone together. Guy gathers all the other NPCs, and it's a really funny moment. Like, there's the guy who he's like always got his hands up because he's always getting robbed, and he's like, "You can put your hand down," and he's like, "I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't put my hand down." It's a really funny moment in that. But there's this moment where Guy says, the Ryan Reynolds character says, and I don't remember how he says, but he basically says, "Are you tired of just like living on autopilot? Are you tired of just kind of," I think he said, being a passive viewer of your life, that you just that things just happen to you. You're not involved in deciding what happens in your life. And I think there are so many teenagers that this is where they live. I think there's a lot of adults that this is where we live, but I think teenagers, by and large, this is where this kind of starts to wake you up to, most of my life, everyone's made decisions for me. I haven't been able to make any decisions, but now I'm 16, now I'm 17, I'm starting to make decisions. And there's this thing where he kind of wakes them up and goes, life is more than you think it is. And every time I feel it in my spirit, and I don't know, did you guys feel it? Was that emotional for you when you heard him just kind of making that speech? It's emotional for me hearing him kind of talk about waking up to this new kind of life. And every time I hear it, it makes me think of the invitation of the kingdom, that really is what Jesus is doing. He's going, there's a way you've always lived. There's a way that you lived in your desires of the flesh and your way of this world. Jesus at one point says, "Come to me, those of you who are burdened and in need of rest, that you're stressed out because you're just living these patterns that everyone else is living," right? He talks to worriers. He talks to people who are stressed, and he just says, "Come to me." And I think this movie gives us a chance to really say to our kids, hey, that's the invitation that Jesus offers. It isn't this invitation to limit your freedom. It really is, as Paul says in Galatians 5, it is for freedom that Christ set you free. It is to be free, but it's a different kind of freedom. Sawyer, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I really vibed with that scene. I wouldn't say I was like getting emotional during that scene, but that for me,
you were already in cardiac arrest.
Very true. I was dead about 20 minutes before that scene hit. And that's so true. Yeah, no, I like that scene. And that's kind of how I watched this movie. First time I saw this movie, I was very on the fence until that scene with the themes. I was like, geez, this movie is kind of like a downer. I don't know what this movie thinks it is the thing. And then I figured that out. And, like, it reminded me of like Jesus wants to set us free. Honestly, and we'll never go into detail on this movie, but like, it reminded me of like what Morpheus is talking about in The Matrix when he's trying to free Neo from the Matrix. And I feel like it's very reminiscent of that, where we're literally like, regardless of whether or not like we originally chose to be and stuff like that, we're slaves to this world and stuff like that. And Jesus offers us this opportunity to get out. And that doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to be easy, but it means that life is going to be real is the thing. And I feel like that's the life that, Guy is like trying to find. He's not trying to find the easy life, because I feel like at the end of this movie, it establishes like it's kind of a chaotic world that they live in, but it's the realist version of it that they can live in. And I really like that vibe.
What were you going to say, Donnie?
So there was a quote that kind of resonated, and I kind of forgot about it when I was kind of looking at some stuff, but there was a quote that said, I'm just a love letter to you. Somewhere out there is the author.
Mm.
I don't think there's a better way to describe the way that Jesus came to earth for us, is that I am a love letter from God
Yeah,
to let you know how much I love you.
that's right.
And
Well, and
I'm-
he is both the letter and the author, right?
exactly. And I'm
yeah.
like, that's
Yeah, that's a beautiful moment.
Mhm.
Heidi, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, just like, what Sawyer was talking about, and kind of going back to what we've been saying this whole time, like God in the Bible, Paul talks about like all things work together for good. And
Yeah.
I think that it's like, oh, that sounds, fine and fun and whatever. Maybe God's good, but it doesn't seem like my good. But like, we live in a world, like we said, universal rule of consequences. But in the kingdom, those consequences can be for our good. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about, Sawyer. Like you have we die, every day. We live in a world of death and consequences. But those things can actually work together for our good if we choose to do life with God. And that's the freedom we find through life in the kingdom.
Yeah. And I think when you get to it, the thing that we talk about here, and we've said it a lot, but I think it's important. I've heard this quote and it really stuck with me for a long time, that sin is not wrong because it's immoral. Sin is wrong because it does not line up with reality. In other words, it doesn't deliver what it promises. Sexual freedom promises you that you will be fulfilled and you'll have an exciting life. But anyone who is honest, who runs down that road at some point looks at themselves and says, this feels empty. If I now have baggage that I carry around with me that doesn't leave me where I want. Financial freedom, the same way, promises me this exciting life, but I'm just left with debt. And I'm left with things that I don't even care about. And sometimes I'm left with greed in my heart where I care about things more than I care about people. And just on and on it goes, right? Revenge promises me that I'm going to get justice, but revenge is a cheap form of justice. It isn't justice. And over and over and over again, if sin is wrong because it doesn't line up with reality, it does not give us what what it promises. But Jesus always does. Jesus is faithful to his promises, and whatever Jesus tells you is real freedom. And so I thought about the Message version of Galatians 5 when we've been talking, and I just kind of wanted to wrap up with this idea that this is really what we're trying to get to our kids from an early age or at the teenage years or as they're starting to develop a love for Jesus. And I think this movie, honestly, I feel like this kind of encapsulates this movie. This is the Message translation of Galatians 5, starting in verse 13. It says, it is absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. Just make sure that you don't use this freedom as an excuse to do whatever you want to do and destroy your freedom. Rather, use your freedom to serve one another in love. That's actually how freedom grows. For everything we know about God's word is summed up in a single sentence. Love others as you love yourself. That is a true act of freedom. If you bite and ravage each other, watch out. In no time at all, you will be annihilating each other. And where will your precious freedom be then? My counsel is this: live freely, animated and motivated by God's Spirit. Then you won't feed the compulsions of selfishness. For there is a root of sinful self-interest in us that is at odds with a free spirit, just as the free spirit is incompatible with selfishness. And so I think this idea here is really what we're trying to get at. And that's when he goes into this long list of what it's obvious, he says, what the kind of life that develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to be loved or to love anyone, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions. He says, I could go on. And then he gets to the part that everyone knows where he lays out the fruit of the Spirit. But life with God looks like this. It's love and joy and peace. And then when he gets to the end of all of this beautiful picture of life with God, he says, there is no law against these things. And a lot of times we read that and we don't even know what that part means. He's referring to the part he was talking about freedom earlier. These are the things you're free to do. When you're done, when you limit your freedom as far as what you do that is wrong and sinful that God tells you not to do, when you say, I'm not going to indulge in what my flesh says to do, you then suddenly become free to be joyful and peaceful and patient and kind and good and gentle and faithful and self-controlled. And there's no law against those. So you can do whatever you want once you're doing those. And that's what we want to get to our kids is life is not found in doing whatever you want, whenever you want. It is life controlled by the Spirit. That's a choice too. And so we think this movie at least opens the door for that. Or if nothing else, it's just going to be a fun time with some of your teenagers. I think they're going to have a great time with it. So we will see you guys next time when we are talking about another really fun movie. This one will be for your kids. And I think your teenagers will like it too. But we think it'll give you great conversations to help you raise your children to love Jesus and his way of life even more. We'll see you then.